showcased what he and his Griselda Records imprint had been doing when it came to bringing lyrical rap and boom bap back into the center of hip-hop, and they definitely succeeded in doing this. From Griselda members like West himself, Benny the Butcher, and Conway the Machine, to guests like Freddie Gibbs, Joey Badass, and Tyler the Creator. This album stands out because it is the ultimate lyrical sparring session between some of the most talented rappers ever, and beyond the competition each lyricist has to stand out as the best, making this record a truly great musical experience. The opulent production makes everything feel so grandiose and cinematic. So overall, for standing as an album that functions like a musical renaissance painting that shows the re-anointing of lyrical rap, Pray for Paris is the best album of 2020. And finally, as the worst album of 2020, we have 6ix9ine's project Tattletales, and after coming out of prison and being despised by the entire hip-hop community for being a rat, this was supposed to be 6ix9ine's grand comeback album, but in actuality, it was even worse than all of his previous records, which really says a lot. Now, the reason why this album is so bad is because 6ix9ine pretty much doubled down on everything he was under scrutiny for at the time, and on top of all that, the only thing worse than the subject matter on this record was the way the actual song sounded. If you didn't like the way 6ix9ine first sounded when he came onto the scene, you will hate this album even more because any small bits of quality that his music once had has all vanished away, and as a result, you are just left listening to a screaming lunatic with a microphone. Now, I could go more into depth about why this record failed, but I'm gonna leave it here. This album is so creatively bankrupt that 6ix9ine had to recruit Lil Ac or Big Mac or DJ Academics. It doesn't even matter what his name is, because if you need to use academics in any capacity to rap on your album, it's clear that this thing is cooked. So for just innovating on how bad an album can really be, the atrocity that is Tattletales kicked off the 2020 decade as the worst album from it. So there you have it. There is my list of the best and worst albums of every year from 2010 to 2020. And let me know, do you want to see more of this? If you want to see me go back to the 2000s or even look into the 2020s, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. And just a reminder, if you want to take the hassle out of eating healthy, give Factor a try and head to factor75.com or click the link below and use my promo code FANTASTICHH50 to get 50% off your first Factor. And if you want to see what rap labels are responsible for producing the highs and lows from this list, check out the suggested video.
I mean, it sounds like total way, but trust me, don't worry, it's like, well, don't worry. That's not the whole way. I said to, so it's, I don't know why, because I don't. Okay, okay, for those. Attends. Juste. Ok, ouais, juste.
Tracks already. And while some have been pretty solid, quite a few others are not as great. It would be nice if there was some kind of ranking system to display how I feel about each one. Oh, would you look at that? It's tier list time, everybody. I'm going to be taking all the recent diss tracks that I've heard, recent being within the past year or so, and ranking them on this tier list, from the Knockout Blow S tier all the way down to the self-knockout D tier. Also, here's a quick Instagram plug, exact same as my channel name, because I just posted there for the first time in like a year and a half yesterday. Let's go.
Why they put Pee Wee Herman in the Hall of Fame? I would give you a pound, but I break your hand.
We're starting off strong with an instant D tier. Melly Mel lost his beef with Eminem before it even started. Melly Mel said Eminem was only in the top 5 of Billboard's top 50 rappers list because he's white. Eminem responded with some honestly pretty funny bars on the song Realist, and then Melly Mel with some honestly pretty funny bars on the song Realist, and then Melly Mel officially responded with the song Kickback, where he basically said nothing for 1 minute and 17 seconds over a cluttered, gunshot-based beat that sounds straight out of 2005. If Swizz Beatz had a little brother who also produced but was significantly worse at it, this is how his beats would sound.
Why you hurt? Why you mad? Now you look bad. Like a roast just crawled out of your book bag.
He also seems to think Eminem's name is Matthew for some reason. Some people were saying this could be a reference to Matthew Mitchell, the character Eminem raps as in Bad Guy, who is Stan's younger brother, but that doesn't really make sense with what Melly Mel is saying at this point in the track. All he really had to say is that Eminem is white, and he must be popping pills again to be beefing with Melly Mel. That's the extent of the content on here. Less than a week after this one was released, Melly Mel publicly apologized for the track, so you can't really consider this one to be anything other than a self-KO.
Candy ass Eminem, bitch ass feminine, Maddie like melanin.
Following that up with another entry in the saga of washed up beefy man who disses Eminem for just over 1 minute, we have a diss track from Benzino, who Eminem first dissed in like 2002. Can these two just let this one go? Vulturious was Benzino responding to stuff that M said about him on the Doomsday Part 2 track, but it is hard to be that invested in this one in 2024. Yo, Eminem should be called Skittles, sweet ass motherfucker. That's how this song opens up. It really sets the tone for the creativity that you're going to be getting here. The problem with these Eminem diss tracks is that they make fun of him for stuff that he already pokes fun at
Okay,
himself. You'd have to do it in a creative way for it to actually sting, but Benzino doesn't appear to have the writing skill needed to do that. Rapping over a beat that samples a Jay-Z song no less. We have another self-knockout. No response necessary to this one. January was a really bad month for diss tracks, man. Megan Thee Stallion had one line that was insinuated to be about Nicki Minaj and her convicted rapist husband. Nicki responded here by saying that Megan has a lot of consensual sex. This was straight up embarrassing for Nicki. She does some real cat in the hat type rhyme schemes here, but the barbs seem to eat it up because she does it in a quirky inflection that usually sounds pretty good, but here it just sounds concerningly deranged.
Why the fuck is you humping on my man? Cause you was lying on your dead mama. I'm not your dead mama, lying on your dead mama.
She also contradicts herself within her own diss, telling Megan to get up on her good foot, implying that she was shot by Tory Lanez, but then just a few bars later, she says that Megan was lying about being shot by Tory Lanez. And then it finishes with a weird, unhinged spoken outro for a whole 2 minutes. It's just a very mean girl bully style diss track that's more embarrassing for Nicki than it is damaging for Megan. It's another self-knockout if you ask me. A flying star, I know. But the fact that Megan didn't even name Nicki in the sex offender line, yet she knew it was about her and her husband, and she fired back with this as quick as she could, and it just sounds terrible, speaks volumes. I promise, it's gonna get better soon. We just had a lot of really whack diss tracks before shit really started kicking off.
They try to rewrite history, make you Elvis a hip-hop, but in the stores, it could be on the shelves next to Slipknot.
Rap Elvis is surprisingly competent when you compare it to Vulturious. Why is that? Because supposedly it wasn't written by Benzino. There's alleged footage that proves that the battle rapper Ness Lee wrote the entire thing. You can tell it was likely ghostwritten comparing it to Vulturious by the fact that this one is 4 minutes long and actually has punchlines and schemes throughout it. There's a couple solid jabs in here too, the best one being Benzino taking shots at Shady Records, because to be fair, it does seem like barely anyone has really benefited from being on that label. With all them false lines that you pitched them, Shady Records sounds like less of a name and more like a description. Come on, that's kind of hard. I do find it hilarious how Benzino says Eminem is clout chasing by targeting him though. Like, come on, let's be real for a second, my man. I'll place it in the C tier. It's an improvement on Vulturious for sure, just still nothing that really warrants a response. And knowing there's a strong possibility that Benzino didn't write it makes it a lot less impressive as a clear improvement on the previous diss.
Yeah, get up with me, fuck sneak this and first person shooter. I hope they came with 3 switches. I crash out like fuck rap.
Now we're getting into the real meat of this. Like that can't really be classified as a full-on diss track, but the Kendrick verse on here that targets Drake and J. Cole basically kicked off the 2024 hip-hop civil war, so I had to include it here. And I'll put it in the S tier. All the way up there. I have mixed thoughts on Future's performance on the song, to be honest, but his hook is solid. I love the beat now, and the Kendrick verse is so impactful. And that's the main thing that I'm ranking here. Pretty much just the Kendrick verse. The delivery is animated and ever-changing in the right way. Take notes, Nicki Minaj. And I don't think there's a single line that doesn't hit. I love the scheme at the end with the whole "for all the dogs" related wordplay. It's incredibly put together. And he mentions Pet Sematary, which scores at points for me. I love Stephen King stuff. The Prince outlived Mike Jack line is great, even though Drake had a great response to that as well, which we'll get to soon. And the whole Be Legit clicking up 40 Water scheme was really nice as well. It's a verse that's layered with metaphors and meaning. Not a single line on here is wasted. An incredible shot from Kendrick. Like I said, S tier for this one. Also, it being called the Knockout tier is just a fun little naming system for this video. It doesn't mean that this track necessarily defeated Cole and Drake instantly, just that it was about as good as you could start this off.
Your first shit was classic, your last shit was tragic. Your second shit put niggas to sleep, but they gassed it.
7-minute drill missed the mark. C tier. It's not helped by the fact that Cole apologized for the track almost immediately after releasing it, and that you could tell he didn't really want to make it. That's even something he briefly acknowledges during the track, talking about how he respects Kendrick and doesn't really want to do this, but it's what the people want to hear. And honestly, if the whole track was Cole acknowledging the pressure people put on him to respond, without actually folding to that pressure and making most of it a half-hearted diss track, I think it would have actually been a really solid take on the beat. I'm also not sure if he was saying Good Kid, Mad City is boring, or if he was saying that To Pimp a Butterfly was boring, because Section 80 was Kendrick's first album, but I don't know if Cole counts that here for whatever reason. But either way, it's a ludicrous take. Like I said, this track really should have just been Cole acknowledging the pressure to respond, rather than actually responding. At least that would be true to what he clearly felt, but I don't think this is quite as awful as the D tier tracks. It's technically a self-KO that took him out of the beef, but it's not the lowest tier of this track if you ask me.
Call up his phone, she won't come home. Don't beat her up, don't beat her up. It must be the drugs.
Tender was Quavo's response less than a day after Chris Brown dropped the track Freak, which contained a few lines aimed at Quavo. And Quavo just comes straight out the gate with a "don't beat her up" line and ad-lib. Tender has some solid shots at Chris, referencing his past abuse issues and substance abuse issues, and mainly hinging around Quavo taking his ex, Karrueche Tran, and Chris being mad about it. It must feel great for Karrueche essentially being treated as an item for Quavo to flaunt in this track against Chris. The lines that fully relate to this are probably pretty good at getting under Chris's skin, which is really the point of them, but the biggest drawback